Okay, so good afternoon again and welcome back to our second session for the Anti-Trafficking of Persons Act of 2012. So we are still on the act of trafficking in persons. Okay, so what acts constitute trafficking in persons? So to continue, we have here to adopt or facilitate the adoption of persons for the purpose of prostitution, pornography, sexual exploitation, forced labor, slavery, involuntary servitude, and death bondage. Now, if a person adopts somebody else for the purpose I have mentioned earlier, that is again an act which constitutes trafficking in persons. So for example, there is a couple who intends to adopt a girl. For this girl to engage in prostitution eventually, then that is an act of anti-trafficking in persons. Even if, okay, you might, as I have mentioned earlier, that there should be a transportation, there should be transporting of one person to another place, okay? So even if, for example, this couple did not transfer or travel to another place just for this girl to engage in prostitution, then that is still considered as trafficking in persons. That's what makes this an expanded act as compared to the original anti-trafficking of persons, because this particular provision was added to add more protection to children who are adopted unknowingly for the purpose of like prostitution or slavery or forced labor. So you might ask, Ma'am, what about if the adopter and the adopted just live, for example, in Baybay, and then the adopter lived in Ormoc City? Is there trafficking in persons in view of the adoption of this girl, and then eventually this girl was lured into prostitution? The answer is yes. Okay, it's still trafficking in persons. Okay, for as long as the victim is a child. So there need no transporting of one child from one place to another. Okay, for as long as the purpose is there, the exploitation is there. Okay. Then the next element is to recruit, to hire, adopt, transport, transfer, obtain, harbor, maintain, provide, offer, receive, or abduct a person by means of threat or force, fraud, deceit, coercion, or intimidation for the purpose of removal or of sale of organs. So, if a person is being in our common parlance, we call it kidnap, no? Kidnap kay para kuhaan siya og mga organs, no? So the organs will be sold to the hospitals or donors who are waiting for organs for if there is a need for organ transplant. That is another form of trafficking in persons. Okay? So, but you might ask, Ma'am, what if this person really offered her organs to be sold? Is there trafficking in persons? No. There is no trafficking in persons if the victim, the alleged victim, voluntarily offered her organs, his or her organs, for sale. There is only trafficking in persons under this act if the act is done through force or intimidation. Okay? For the purpose of solely removing the organs for sale. Okay? Now, to believe that if the person did not perform such labor or services, he or she or another person should suffer serious harm or physical restraint. Now, this act will also be trafficking in persons for the purpose of exploitation or removal of organs can also be committed even with consent of the person if the person is under duress, if under intimidation, if under force. For example, okay, gikidnap siya. Unya, giinan siya nga kung kuhaan ka na mong organs, kung dili ka mo sugot nga ang imong organs among ikuha kay among ibaligya, among patyo na imong nanay nga tigulang nga siya sa inyo ha. Dili sugot ka. So there was consent nga kuhaan ka. Is there trafficking in persons? Yes, it's still a violation of this act because the exploitation will always be there. The means by which your consent was obtained in the removal of your organs for it to be sold to another person is illegal. Okay? Did you get it? Okay. Now, next is to recruit, transport, harbor, obtain, transfer, maintain, hire, provide, adopt, or receive a child for purposes of exploitation or trading them. including but not limited to the act of buying or selling a child for any consideration or for barter or for purposes of exploitation. Okay, so this is not so much in our province, kay probinsya man ta, no? So daghan ni siya ngadto sa mga urban areas, no? Kanang dagko kaya mga syudad nga ang ilang mga anak ilang ipamaligya, and then kay bawo siya nga iyang anak i-engage into prostitution, iya gyapon gibaligya. So that is a form of child trafficking. Okay, now trafficking for purposes of exploitation of children shall also include these following acts, no? All forms of slavery or practices similar to slavery, involuntary servitude, debt bondage, forced labor, including recruitment of children for use in armed conflict. Hala, appeal the siya. O, daghan ni siya sa Mindanao, no? So, saan na siya? Moro Islamic, I'm not very sure, MILF or MNLF ba na siya. So, if the child is recruited, no? If the child is recruited for him to join an armed conflict, so this is another example of trafficking in persons. So again, you must have to remember, if the victim is a child, unique siya, no? Lahi ang iyang circumstances. There need not be transportation. They need not transport the child from one place to another. There need not be coercion. Dili kinahanglan nga bugson gud ang bata, no? But for as long as it is a child, no? Because bata magud siya. Now we have a definition of a child under the child abuse law, that there are these people who are below 18 years of age, or those who are excuse me, above 18 years of age but cannot fully take care of themselves. So there is this cannot fully take care of themselves, because if a child or a person below 17 years of age, he is not deemed to be able, no, to decide for himself yet fully. So even with the absence of a threat or intimidation or coercion, for as long as it involves a child, it is always anti-trafficking of persons if the child is being exploited in the end. It's not just for prostitution, it's not just for forced labor. Now we know it also includes the participation of the child in armed conflicts, because the child will not be able to know what really is he doing in a particular place, if he is really fighting for the government or for this armed group, no? The child will not really know if what he's doing is a crime or not. So that makes it different from it being committed to the adults, male or female. Again, do not forget, appeal sa mga lalaki mga victims sa aning anti-trafficking in persons, but more gid ni siya sa mga babae, because ang mga babae man in town ang very vulnerable, including the children, no? Ay kalibog, ay kabalaka mga boys or mga laki, kay always sa bagid mo complain, why is it always nga ang mga babae ra gid atong i-protect, no? In the Philippines, we have VAUSE and all these laws, the Magna Carta of Women. I once spoke to a group of teachers, and then they asked, ma'am, why is there no Magna Carta for men? No? Ngano gyud nga walay Magna Carta sa lalaki? Why is it always for women? So kini siyang anti-trafficking of persons is also applicable for men. And more often, they are transported, they are kidnapped, they are intimidated, they are forced to render forced labor. No, not so much with sexual exploitation, and also for the removal of organs. Okay, got it? Okay. Now we'll continue to the use, procuring, or offering of a child for production and trafficking of drugs. So appeal sad siya kung ang bata gamiton kung mag-traffic og drugs, magbaligya og drugs, no? So we have another law, the Juvenile Justice and Welfare Act RA 9363. Now under this law, a child below 15 years old has no criminal liability, di ba? And if a child is below 18 but above 15, he is deemed to have criminal liability if the court will find out that he has discernment, no? So kining RA 9363 under aniniya, ang bata nga gamiton sa crime below 15 years old, wala siya criminal liability. Mao na siyang daghan karon nga mga criminal activities nga nag-involve og bata. Okay? So this law, kini siyang RA 9363, murag problema gid ni karon sa gobyerno, no? This has to be amended because even atong mga 10-year-old, even you, my dear students, no? I think most of you are below 18 pa. But I know you have discernment already, no? Mauna mo mapilig kinsa inyong banahon, maayo ba na siya banahon, no? Sa inyong kuhaon nga kurso. So, you already have discernment. So, kining 9363, this really have to be amended para mataas-taas na ang age of criminal liability. No? So, because of this law, this has been exploited, no? It has been exploited by the people who are into criminal acts. No? They use children. Bisan kining sa Manila, kining mangayo sa kalsada, and then kuman idagan ganin imbutang mga snatchers, mga bata man eh. Pag kuman-ani nila, na sila tunulan dito nga mga dagkong tao. Ang mura na siyang sindikato. So that is exploitation of our children. No? Kaya wala man gud na sila liability, di na sila pwede presuhon. But they may not have criminal liability, but they have civil liability. Kinsa may mabayad sa civil liability? Ang ilang parents. No? So kung makasa ang bata, di siya pwede mapreso. Pero ang iyang parents, kinahanglan sila mabayad og damages sa pamilya sa lain nga gisad-an sa ilang anak. Okay? Now, the next act of trafficking in persons is to use, procure, or offer a child for illegal activities or work which by its nature or the circumstances in which it is carried out is likely to harm the health, safety, or morals of the child. So, for example, a child or a 14-year-old is being hired to work as a waitress, no? Taga-baybay, taga-barangay, sa may example sa itong barangay Pansagan, barangay Siabo, gihire nga to sa Manila as a waitress. Sugot siya. Sugot yung nanay tatay. So there was the element of consent, ha? Nisugot siya. So she was being transported from Siabo to Manila to work in a bar as a waitress. Is there trafficking of persons? Are the parents o kini po mag-transport liable under this act? The answer is yes. Now, as I have said, the element of consent might not be present if the victim is a child. Okay? Kalimot, jud kalimot ana. That makes this law unique. Kay i-protect din ang bata din. Whether na consent ang bata, basta the end is always to exploit her in whatever illegal or unlawful means. It is always trafficking in persons. It is always a violation of this law. Okay? Then, to organize or direct other persons to commit the offenses defined acts of trafficking. So, magbayad siya, no? Ako magbayad ko tao, dili ako mo act na. Ako murag financer, no nga. Okay ka na mo-engage ta og kanang trafficking o human smuggling. Kini sila ato ni transport sa Manila kay patrabaho na to ngadto sa club kay may mo sila dancer, no? So, ato na silang ilaron nga magtrabaho sila ngadto sa pharmacy o ngadto sa grocery kay ganahan man sila mag-uniform ug naa sila for example sa malls. But in the end, pag-abot sa Manila, they became prostitutes. Wala, dili yun directly ako ni involved. But I was the one who financed now everything. So, am I liable under this law? Yes. Okay? Doesn't have to follow that I myself has to do the criminal act. No? Kaya naaman tayo under criminal law, naman to different kinds of principle. The principle by direct participation, the principle by inducement. So, ako ang principle by inducement. Although wala ako directly ni-participate sa act, pero ako yung nagsugo nga buhato na siya, so I am also liable. Okay? So, what is the expanded coverage of this Anti-Trafficking in Persons Act? So, under Trafficking of Persons Act, there is already this crime of attempted trafficking in persons. Wala ni sa unang RA 9208, no, sa original Anti-Trafficking of Persons Act. So kini siya gidugangan ni karon, the mere attempt to traffic a person, to exploit him, no, to achieve the purpose of exploiting him, that is already considered as a crime. no? So pagsugod pa lang nimo, mag-attempt pa lang ka nga dili gid mahitabo nga madayon gid nimo, attempted pa lang. For example, what do you mean by attempted trafficking of persons? Ngadto ka sa usa ka baryo, no? Naghimo kun tay ka ngadto orientation kay ang inyong agency mang recruit, no? Naghimo ka ngadto nag-speak ka ngadto before the people, and then you conducted the orientation, and then after that, whether or not you achieve the purpose, for as long as the very end of that particular thing that you're doing is for exploitation of these women and children or these men, no, towards the commission of the acts being deemed to be violations of anti-trafficking in persons, that is still a crime in accordance with the law. Ano ka? Wa pa man koy ka nang kuan, wa pa man mo madaang mga babae nga to sa Manila, dahil pa man mi nag-istorya pa man mi sa baryo, nagsabot pa man mi nga amo silang patrabahoon ngadto sa Manila. Now, if it is found out that indeed your purpose is not legitimate, no, wala gid ay kay firm dito, wala gid ay kay company nga patrabahuan ang mga bata, you are not directly connected to any employment agency. If it is found out that you just conducted this seminar for the purpose of luring these girls or these people to work eventually as prostitute in Manila or somewhere else, that is already a crime under this law. That is attempted trafficking in persons. Okay? So, if a victim is a child, any of the following acts shall be deemed as attempted trafficking in persons. Attempt pa lang, ha? Okay. So, facilitating the travel of a child who travels alone to a foreign country or territory without valid reason and without the required clearance or permit from the Department of Social Welfare and Development, or a written permission from the child's parent or legal guardian. So, have you experienced traveling abroad with a child? So, before you could do so, you have to secure a permit from the DSWD office, the permit to travel. And then the DSWD will have to require you to execute an affidavit. No? Now, the child cannot travel without the presence of his parents. But there are exceptions to that rule, that the child can travel without the parents if there is a written consent from the parents and there is a permit from the CHWD or the DSWD. Now, without this permit, the child can be accosted in the airport. The child will not be allowed to travel with you. No, I had that experience before when my son was still very young. We went to Hong Kong, and we were required by the DSWD to get a permit even or the consent from his father. No? Unless, of course, you can prove that you and the father are not married or you are separated. Because there are also cases wherein there are custody fights in the court, there's custody battles, and then the parent would bring the child outside of the country. That's why the airports now are very strict on the travel documents relating to children. So I always have with me before the birth certificate of my child when we travel together. And of course, this permit from the DSWD. Okay? Or executing for consideration an affidavit of consent or written consent for adoption. So, recruiting a woman to bear a child for purposes of selling the child. Simulating a birth certificate for the purpose of selling the child. So, if you hire a woman, so this is not really a practice. This is not really so much here in the Philippines, but this is prevalent in other countries. No, a woman is being hired to get pregnant, and then the child eventually will be sold, no, to another couple once the woman gives birth. And soliciting a child and acquiring the custody through any means from among hospitals, clinics, nurseries or daycare centers, refugee or evacuation centers, and low-income families for purposes of selling the child. Okay, so just the mere fact of you convincing the law enforcement for you to have the custody of a child, and then eventually the child will be exploited, that is another form of attempted trafficking of persons. So the accomplice liability, when he knowingly aids, abets, and cooperates in the execution of the offense by previous or simultaneous acts of trafficking. Unlike the accessory, the accomplice helped, no? The accomplice has to do something in the execution or in the furtherance of the commitment of the crime. So ang accessory murag laro na siya sa pagsugod. So either magtabang na siya nga ma-organize, or kung sa hold up pa na magtabang na siya, maghatag na siya og escape car sa paglayas, no? Ang kining accomplice itabang gid siya. Actually dili gid siya ang pinaka main gyud nga perpetrator, but he is helping, or helped in the commission of the crime. So unsa may example aning mga accomplice? So, for example, you are a barangay official and you know that these illegal recruiters are doing these things to recruit the young ladies of your barangay to eventually lure them to prostitution. You know that, but you have no participation whatsoever in the crime, no? Pero kabalo ka, and then you facilitated their entry to your barangay. Pero wala ka diha pag-istorya, no? Or you are a teacher. Let's say teacher lang ta, kay murag mga teachers man mo, no? You facilitated the presence of this particular recruiter in your class. Okay? Imo na siyang gi-invite imong ipa-attend sa imong klase. And then this person recruited your students. No, siya nag-recruit, siya nag-istorya, nanghatag pamphlets, ikaw wala ra kay ra ka nag-invite. Now what is your liability? You the teacher who invited her into your class. You are an accomplice. Okay? You are an accomplice to the crime of human or illegal Trafficking of Persons Act of 2012. So you will have your own liability apart from the main perpetrator. Okay? So whoever has the knowledge of the commission of the crime and without having participated therein, either as principal or accomplice, takes part in its commission by any of the following manners, are either accessories or accomplice. No? So, dili na sila maogyod ang naghimog sa akta, pero murag tabang lang na sila. So, profiting themselves or assisting the offender to profit by the effects of the crime. So, wala dyan ka mismo, ikaw lang nag-assist lang ka. Concealing or destroying the body of the crime, effects, or instruments in order to prevent its recovery. Harboring, concealing, or assisting in the escape of the principal of the crime, provided the accessory acts with abuse of his or her public functions or is known to be habitually guilty of the same act. So for example, as I have mentioned earlier, you are a teacher, no? You invited this person in your class, and then you know in the first place that she will be recruiting these people and eventually they will become prostitutes. But if you did not know anything about the exploitation that this person, this illegal recruiter, is planning for your students, then you have no participation whatsoever. You are neither an accomplice nor an accessory. If you don't know anything about the purpose for which this recruiter is present in your class, for all you know, they are just recruiting. For example, you have fourth-year students, in high school students, and then this is a good opportunity for you students to obtain employment after graduation if they're not pursuing college. So you're inviting a resource person to orient them as to what possible employment that they may have after graduation. If that is the case, then you are not into anti-trafficking of persons. What is important here? Important here for the person to become liable for this act is that he knew, either he is part of the plan or he knew of the illicit or illegal plan to exploit these people eventually after their recruitment or their hiring. Okay? So if you have no knowledge whatsoever, you are not an accomplice nor an accessory. Okay? Do you understand that? Now, another thing that will become you, that will make you an accessory or an accomplice is when you knowingly lease or sublease or allowed to use any house, building, or establishment for the purpose of promoting trafficking in persons. Okay, so for example, no, wala ka nila sulti nga, mauna ilang trabaho that they're doing illegal activities, but makita mo nga they're bringing in, there are people coming in and out of their place, mga bata, mga babae. Yeah, you did not even ask why. Tapat inyo nang balay, imong gipaabangan. Yeah, you were not even asking why are people coming in and out of the house that I'm leasing to you, no? Sa mga babae o mga bata. Wala lang yung ka, mura kag wala lang yung kay pake, kaya sa kamarites, no? And eventually, you might have in mind nga something is going on. You could have asked that person kung unsa gid imong negosyo, or you could have asked the barangay officials to conduct an investigation as to what is really going on in the house that you leased or subleased, no? And then eventually kini nga mga bata ni puyo na diha, daghan na muyo diha nya wala lang gihapon ka. And then pagkahuman na nakahibaw na dai ka nga gitransport na sila, ngadto sila sa Manila kay gihimo sila mga dancer. So that makes you an accessory to the crime. Now unless of course wala gyud kay way to know or to ascertain or to discern kung sayo pa nilang gibuhat o wala. No? But if you have means or nanduda ka ang gamay nya wag gyud kay gibuhat, na kay liability ana. No? Kay grabe naman po wag gyud ka nagduda nga daghan mga bata magsudgawa sa balay niya o na mga bata na muyo bisag kinsa lang wa kakaila, and then kini mga bata mukalit lang kawala nya lain na po nga set ang bata na puli wag gyud kan hibuong ana. So that will make you an accessory to the crime. Okay? So you have to be careful when you are leasing your premises to people you don't even know. Kinahanglan nga ang imong paabangon sa imong balay imo gyud ang kaila. Kaya ka kasabot unay mga illegal activities diha. Mahimo kang accessory. So even gani sa Drug Abuse Act, kung ang imong balay na igapat session diha, mahimo man kang liable sa ana. Mahimo man na siyang drug den, no? So kinahanglan magbantay ka kinsa gaabang sa imong balay, ang imong premises. Okay? To produce, print, issue, or distribute and issued tampered or fake counseling certificates, registration stickers, overseas employment certificates, or other certificates of any government agency which issues these certificates, decals, or such other markers as proof of compliance of government regulatory and pre-departure requirements. So kung ang imong trabaho, dili gid ka ang recruiter, pero ikaw ang normally mag-print sa mga materials kung tahay, making it appear that this illegal recruitment agency is indeed licensed to do business, no? Ikaw may naghimo nila nga legal, legitimate, despite the fact na illegitimate sila, no? Illegal sila. No? Kabalo ka nga sayop ila gibuhat, but still padayon lang gyapon ka ikaw tighimo sa pamphlet, wa gyud kay any involvement in the act of let's say recruitment. Ang imo na pag-print lang ang materials, are you liable? Yes. No? Liable gyapon ka under this act. That will make you an accessory to the act of or to the crime of anti-trafficking in persons under this law. Okay. Now, to advertise, publish, print, broadcast, or distribute or cause the advertisement, publication, printing, or broadcasting, or distribution by any means, no, flyer or any propaganda material that promotes trafficking in persons. So, nag-advertise ka, for example, sa Facebook, no, recruitment, na oy naay recruitment agency sa Manila, good job opportunity, labi na karon kay pandemic, so nawad-an mong trabaho, at trabaho to sa Manila, no? If you know that the purpose for which the recruitment is done is for illegal purposes, to exploit these young individuals, male or female, no? That is illegal. That is a violation of this act, trafficking of persons. But if you don't know, then you have no liability, no? Okay? So, how will we know, or how will the authorities know that you are aware of what is going on when you repeatedly do that for the same person? Of course, kay magsige lang kag pang-recruit, magsige kag publish diha mangutana mangyud ka og naunsa na, di ba? So if you regularly do that, you become an accessory to the crime of trafficking in persons. Or you assist in the conduct of misrepresentation or fraud for purposes of facilitating the acquisition of clearance, necessary exit documents from government agencies. So itabang ka nga, for example, nagtrabaho ka sa gobyerno, itabang ka nga maka-obtain sila og clearance, no, to have travel permits, no, mga clearances sa police, sa court para magrantan, o for example to sa NBI, you assisted them, no? So that will make you an accessory to the crime of anti-trafficking in persons. Okay. Or to facilitate, assist, or help in the exit and entry of persons from and to the country at international and local airports, territorial boundaries, and seaports who are in the possession of unissued, tampered, or fraudulent travel documents for the purpose of promoting trafficking in persons. Tabang lang ka, provide lang ka og ang imong sakyanan mo ay giabangan, no? Magsugat ka nila sa airport, ni imo silang gihatod sa hotel. But kabalo ka nga they're engaged in that particular kind of business. Unless of course you don't know, no? If you don't know, if you know and then you make it a regular thing, abot na nila, ikaw gid ang musugat, mapakaon, motor, no? Just for them to look for prospects. So that makes you either an accessory or accomplice, depende sa gravity or depende sa imong participation, the extent of your participation in the commission of the crime. Okay? Or to confiscate, conceal, or destroy the passport, travel documents, or personal documents belonging to trafficked persons in furtherance of trafficking, to prevent them from leaving the country or seeking redress from the government or appropriate agencies. So ikaw mo ay para tago sa mga dokumento, no? Wala ka nitabang nilag pangidnap, panguha, pang-recruit, pero ikaw may parahipos sa mga dokumento, no? Mga passport nga i-withhold ka para lang yun mag-engage into involuntary servitude, then that also makes you an accomplice or accessory to the crime. Now, when you knowingly benefit from financial or otherwise to make use of labor or services of a person held to the condition of involuntary servitude. So, wala ka ni appeal, wala ka ni tabang pang-recruit, pero for example, ikaw ang naghatag nilang idea nga, hey, this barangay daghan mga batan-on dinhi nga mga maiglawas, pwede ni sila imong construction workers. Nya malior ni sila kay wa man sila mga trabaho ilang ginikanan, mangupras man sila, asa man sila mangupras nga gamay ra ihatag silang tatay kay so manrabaho sa Manila nga ilag yun ang sweldo. So ikaw, you gave them the idea that na-prospect ani nga barangay, but you did not in any way participate in the commission of the crime itself. Pero you were the tour guide. You introduced the illegal recruiter or the recruiter or this perpetrator to the barangay officials or the parents of these children who became victims of trafficking. That makes you an accomplice to the crime. Okay? Also, when you tamper with, destroy, or cause the destruction of evidence or influence to attempt the witnesses in the investigation or prosecution of the case. No? For example, na ikaso gi-file, ikaw nihangyo ka nga, ay na lang mo-file, kay kanang samok pa ng kikiha. Atas na lang mo, kay kapoy man po na, mapildi mo lang gihapon mo. Okay? When the government will know about that, then that will make you liable. Okay? Or when you destroy, conceal, remove, confiscate, or possess, or attempt to destroy, conceal, remove, or confiscate actual or purported passport or travel immigration documents, no, or working permit of any other actual or purported government identification of any person in order to prevent, restrict, or attempt to prevent or restrict without lawful authority the person's liberty. So matong akong giyon kanina, wala jud kay labot sa act, pero ikaw may parahipos sa dokumento, ikaw may para tago, no? Ikaw ana nimo hipuson, ana nimo ikaw para kuha sa passport kay para kini nga ta mabound ni siya, di na siya kagawa sa country. Now, and lastly, to utilize his or her office to impede the investigation, prosecution, or execution of lawful orders in this case. No, so kung you're a public official or a public employee and then you try to influence in the investigation or prosecution of the crime, then that will also make you liable. Okay? So under this law, there's also what you call as qualified trafficking in persons. So what is this qualified trafficking in persons? Under the law, when you hear the word qualified, lahi na siya because legal parlance may have different meanings sa ordinary English word, no? So when you hear the word qualified in the legal parlance in law, nag-connote na siya, it connotes mas grabe, no? Grabe or mas grave siya. So what is qualified trafficking in persons? Number one, when the trafficked person is a child below 18 years old. So he might be above 18 years old, but if he is fully unable to take care of himself, that will still make him a child under the definition of the child, no? The child abuse law. So that will still make the person liable under qualified trafficking in persons. Okay? So dili kinahanglan nga below 18 gyud ang biktima nga para makonsider nato nga bata. Pwede po siya above 18, 20, 25 pero naa siya diferensya. So mostly mga mental problems ba. Murag na siya gamay nga problema, let's say kining mga mongoloid, kining uban nga naay problema sa pangutok, no? So even if they are beyond 18 years old, kung mabiktima sila aning trafficking in persons, ang kanang tao nga nagbiktima nila, he's liable for qualified trafficking. So mas dako ang iyang penalty kaysa normal nga trafficking in persons. Kay qualified man siya, mas ni grabe ang offense niya. Tungod kay nag-involve og bata or those persons who are deemed children or child under the law. Okay? Now, when the adoption is affected through RA 8043 or the Inter-Country Adoption Act of 1995, and said adoption is for the purpose of prostitution, pornography, sexual exploitation, forced labor, and etc. No? So, here is this couple. Now, they applied for and was granted adoption by virtue of the Inter-Country Adoption Act. Now, unsa man ang inter-country? Now, naay couple nga tuwa sa gawas or taga-gawas, normally mahitabo na siya sa mga former Filipino citizens or Filipino citizens nga di na sila Filipino kay nagminyo sila og lain nga mga citizens. They were fully divested of their Filipino citizenship. Nag-adopt sila og Filipino nga bata. No? So, they resorted to inter-country adoption. If the purpose for which they adopted this child by virtue of Republic Act and Inter-Country Adoption Act of 1995 is for the child to be exploited in any way, in any manner, no, that will constitute qualified trafficking in persons. And when the crime is committed by large scale or by a syndicate. Now, when can you say that the crime is committed by large scale or by syndicate? And the crime is committed by syndicate if it is carried by a group of 3 persons conspiring or confederating with each other, and it becomes large scale if it is committed to or against 3 persons individually or as a group. Okay? So I guess that's all for our second session. Now, as I have said, just write your questions, and I presume that you have questions in mind. You just have to prepare them, write it on a piece of paper, and I will answer them all by our last session. Okay? So I'll see you all on the next session. Thank you, and have a nice day.